I think most people are aware that Sony Pictures has the licensing rights to make Spider-Man movies, but did you know they also once had the rights to characters like Thor, Ghost Rider, and Luke Cage? This is a complete timeline of every studio that once owned a Marvel character, what they did with it, and how it made its way back to Marvel Studios.
I wasn't sure I'd ever be back.
In the mid-1970s, Marvel was looking to monetize off their characters in live action. This was where they allowed Children's Television Workshop to make Spider-Man related skits free of charge, which aired on PBS. While Marvel weren't directly getting paid for this, it was good exposure for their brand and characters to try and sell more comics.
Where are you coming from, Spider-Man?
By 1977, Universal licensed the live-action TV rights to The Incredible Hulk and created a show lasting 80 episodes and 5 TV movies. The same year, a live-action Spider-Man TV series was created on CBS after purchasing the rights. Following the success of the Incredible Hulk TV series, Marvel wanted to adapt more characters to TV, giving Universal Doctor Strange, who made a TV movie that aired on CBS in 1978 starring Peter Hoden. They hoped to turn this into a series, but the reception didn't really justify. While CBS was making a live-action Spider-Man show, Stan Lee of Marvel Comics granted the Toei Company the rights to adapt the character into a live-action television series in Japan, which first aired in 1978. This was a two-way deal, allowing Marvel to use Toei's Super Sentai characters for their own comics. Despite the initial rating success of the CBS Spider-Man series, it was considered too juvenile, lacked comic villains, and had budget constraints, leading to the cancellation in 1979 after just 13 episodes, reverting the rights back to Marvel. Just as the American Spider-Man was ending, so was the Japanese version. But even after 2 seasons, the show was a success in Japan, becoming a cult classic for its over-the-top action, wild storytelling, and innovative use of effects. However, the next decade is when things started to get really interesting. Having a good working relationship with Universal, Marvel once again collaborated with them to create 2 Captain America TV movies at the end of the decade.
The girls, where are they?
In a room under number 2 stack. They're all right.
During the 1980s, Marvel struggled financially and decided they needed to license the film rights of its characters to various studios. These deals would allow studios to make movies with their characters, so as long as they made a film every so many years, all the rights would revert back. In the early 1980s, lifelong comic fan George Lucas went to Universal Pictures to pitch a Howard the Duck movie. After the success of Star Wars, Universal was more than happy to collaborate with George and went to Marvel to obtain the film rights to the character, who then quickly began production on a Howard the Duck movie.
No more Mr. Nice Duck.
In 1983, producer Bernard Eichner met with Marvel's Stan Lee to discuss a Fantastic Four movie, but a deal couldn't be made. For now. In 1985, Canon Films bought the rights to Spider-Man for $225,000 reduce, which is about $750,000 in today's money. Marvel would also receive a small percentage of any film produced in the 5-year window the deal lasted for. Canon Film also acquired Captain America around the same time and planned to make a movie based on the character, but faced budget issues. The following year, the George Lucas produced Howard the Duck movie was released, but due to its financial and critical failure, Universal decided not to continue using the character and let it revert back to Marvel. Meanwhile, Constantine Films acquired the film rights to the Fantastic Four characters, including the Silver Surfer, and New World Pictures secured the Punisher. Jumping forward to 1989, where Ronald Perlman acquired Marvel, taking the company public. He quickly tried to expand the business by purchasing other companies like Toy Biz and Fleer Trading Cards, but these acquisitions resulted in massive debt and Marvel being unable to recover due to declining revenue. As this was all going on, New World Pictures released a Punisher TV movie starring Dolph Lundgren.
Who sent you?
Batman.
Over at the University of Southern California, film students Eric Fleming and Robert Lederman went to Constantine Films in 1989 asking for permission to make a short film featuring the Silver Surfer as proof of concept for creating realistic silver-colored people using CGI, in which they were approved.
What do you got?
Not quite sure, but it's moving like lightning.
Moving into the 1990s, where the rights for Iron Man went to Universal and Spider-Man reverted back to Marvel due to Canon Films not producing any film in their timeframe. Canon also lost Captain America, shifting to 21st Century Film Corporation, who made a low-budget TV movie starring Matt Salinger. The rights for Spider-Man ended up with Carolco Pictures, who hired James Cameron to write and direct a Spider-Man movie. Over at New World Pictures, they were facing financial troubles and dissolved as an active production company, leading to The Punisher going back to Marvel. Leaving Marvel was Deathlock, going to Paramount Pictures, who spent several years trying to develop a movie based on the cybernetic character. This same year, Bridget Nielsen had promotional photos taken of her as She-Hulk for a Universal movie that never progressed beyond the concept stage due to lack of funding and interest from the studio.
About that, it's true.
During the 1990s, Marvel's primary revenue source, comic book sales, was in decline. Comics were suffering due to the oversaturation and people trying to invest in the books so they could sell them at a marked up price a number of years down the line. People would buy boxes of first issues, thinking in a decade they would be worth thousands. But something is only valuable when there's high demand, limited supply. And because Marvel were producing a significant amount of comics, people realized this wasn't a wise investment, leading to book sales plummeting. With the comic company not having a stable financial base, they sold the Blade film rights to New Line Cinema, Columbia Pictures acquired Luke Cage, while Wesley Snipes tried to convince different studios to purchase Black Panther so he could play the character. But he couldn't find any takers. With the rights of the Fantastic Four set to expire with Constantine Films in 1992, Bernard Eichner partnered with Roger Corman to produce a low-budget film for $1 million. Filming began on December 28, 1992, 3 days before they were set to expire. Directed by Oli Sassoni and completed in less than a month. That same year, Savoy Pictures had Doctor Strange.
I've come to bargain.
Coming back to that Silver Surfer short, on the 21st of September 1993, it premiered at USC's First Look Film Festival. Due to being a noteworthy film school, this created a lot of attention and interest from major studios to make a feature-length film based on the character and started approaching Constantine Productions. Over at 20th Century Fox, they were securing characters like X-Men and Deadpool. In 1994, trailers for the Fantastic Four movie were being shown in theaters and on home video. The cast promoted the film at San Diego Comic-Con and planned to premiere it at the Mall of America on January 19, 1994. However, the event was abruptly cancelled and producers issued cease and desist orders confiscating the film's negatives. Speculation then arose that the film was only made to retain the rights of the characters, a claim backed up by Stan Lee, who said it was never meant to be released. However, Roger Corman and Bernard Eichner denied this. Eichner stated that Marvel executive Avi Arad was the one who stopped the release, fearing it could harm the brand. Arad reportedly bought the film for a couple of $1 million and ordered all prints to be destroyed, but not all were. The movie has since been leaked online in a high-quality format. Despite the movie not being released, Constantine Films still had the rights to the Fantastic Four, because the deal stated they only needed to be in production of a movie with those characters. They didn't actually have to release it.
Say that again?
Carolco Pictures failed to produce James Cameron's Spider-Man film and went bankrupt, where MGM briefly acquired the rights to the character. And Carolco Pictures wasn't the only company going bankrupt. In the mid-1990s, Marvel's financial problems were worsening due to declining comic sales and mismanagement of the company under Ronald Perlman's leadership. It had gotten to the point where in 1996, Marvel filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, owing over $700 million dues. So in order to pay this back, the rights to Black Panther and The Punisher shifted to Artisan Entertainment, who also picked up Iron Fist and Man-Thing. Universal acquired Namor in a contract that I don't think anyone understood, and Mort the Dead Teenager. 20th Century got Iron Man, Nick Fury, Daredevil, and Elektra, while Ghost Rider went to Columbia Pictures. Though, as Marvel were giving all these characters away, they did get Captain America back. As this was all happening, 20th Century Fox aired a TV movie called X Generation featuring mutants from their catalogue of characters. Savoy Pictures went bankrupt in 1997, so Doctor Strange was once again on the move, this time to Miramax. I mentioned that MGM briefly had the rights to Spider-Man, but in 1998, Sony Pictures paid the movie studio $7 million and some James Bond distribution rights to get Spider-Man. In this deal, Marvel retained the rights to create animated Spider-Man shows, but Sony had significant influence over the production and distribution. Any Spider-Man animated TV show created, Marvel had to work with Sony and agree to revenue-sharing terms. Sony also had approval rights for how Spider-Man was portrayed in these shows. Sony did, however, get full live-action TV rights. One of Sony Pictures' companies, Columbia Pictures, also secured the rights to Thor from Marvel during this time too. New Line Cinema had made the most of their Blade acquisition by releasing the first theatrically released Marvel movie since Howard the Duck, while 20th Century Fox aired a Nick Fury Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV movie. Hot off the back of Blade, New Line took Iron Man off 20th Century Fox's hands as they were more interested in focusing on making X-Men movies, because they believed those characters were less of a financial risk. Just like the Fantastic Four, where the studio made a deal with Constantine Films to produce big-budget Fantastic Four movies. Speaking of 20th Century Fox, they released their first X-Men movie in the year 2000, which was both financially and critically successful. Because of this, they saw no use in retaining Nick Fury, who went back to Marvel after they decided not to make a sequel or series based on David Hasselhoff's TV movie. DreamWorks had the rights to Shang-Chi in 2001 and started developing a Hands of Shang-Chi movie with Blade director Stephen Norrington. In 2002, Sony gave us our first Spider-Man movie, breaking all kinds of records, from being the first movie to break 100 million in a single weekend to becoming the highest grossing comic book movie at the time. That same year, Blade released a sequel, which, like the first, was a modest box office success. Over the next couple of years, movies based on Marvel characters were coming hot and fast, with studios seeing the success of Spider-Man, X-Men, and Blade. 2003 gave us an X-Men sequel and Daredevil movie from 20th Century Fox, while Universal Pictures released Hulk. 2004 was the year of Spider-Man 2, Blade Trinity, and The Punisher, produced by Lionsgate after purchasing Artisan Entertainment. At some point over the last few years, Lionsgate had acquired Black Widow's film rights, and in 2004, David Hayter, who co-wrote the first two X-Men movies, was set to write and direct a film based on the character. 20th Century Fox gave us Fantastic Four and Elektra in 2005, making it 11 movies based on Marvel characters released in the last 6 years, which was a turning point for Marvel Studios. After nearly a decade of Iron Man moving around different companies trying to make a film based on the character, even one written and directed by Quentin Tarantino, New Line returned the rights to Marvel Studios. Recognizing the success of the movies based on their characters, Marvel Studios wanted to make their own films, deciding to self-finance the pictures. So they sought to regain control of their characters, getting the rights back to Thor, Black Panther, Black Widow, Deathlock, Doctor Strange, Mort the Dead Teenager, Iron Fist, and Shang-Chi, and in development those films were in at other studios. They also got Man-Thing back pretty much immediately after Lionsgate Films / Artisan Entertainment released a Man-Thing TV movie, not seeing any future with the character. A new deal was made with the Hulk, where Marvel would finance movies involving the character, with Universal only distributing. In order to finance the films Marvel Studios had planned, they secured a $500 million loan from Merrill Lynch, but if they were unable to pay it back, they would lose all the rights to the remaining characters they had left.
What did it cost?
Everything.
Despite the financial and critical disappointment of Blade Trinity, New Line Cinema wasn't done with the character, releasing a live-action TV series with Kirk Jones replacing Wesley Snipes. As 20th Century Fox and Sony were releasing movies like X-Men The Last Stand, Ghost Rider, Spider-Man 3, and Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer, Marvel Studios were in development creating what would become the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And in 2008, Marvel Studios released their first independent movie, Iron Man, starting what would go on to be the most successful film franchise of all time. This film was distributed by Paramount in a deal that would see them get 10% of the box office, while Marvel retained full creative control and financing of the films. As for the Incredible Hulk movie, Marvel had a similar distribution deal, but with Universal. However, in 2009, Disney bought Marvel for $4 billion, where the characters remain today. As Paramount Pictures still had distribution rights, Disney paid them $230 million so they could be the ones to distribute The Avengers and Iron Man 3, two movies that were still in Marvel Studios and Paramount's initial agreement. This was a very good deal for Disney, as the Avengers movie made $1.5 billion, Iron Man 3 made $1.2, so 10% of $2.7 is $270 million, meaning Paramount missed out on an extra $40 million. Disney's purchase of Marvel also saw the company renegotiate its deal with Sony and Spider-Man, leading to Sony forfeiting its animated TV rights in exchange for retaining the Spider-Man film rights.
I still get chills when I see that sign.
Over the next few years, the rights for Punisher went back to Marvel Studios after the disappointing financial and critical outcome for Warzone. New Line had enough of Blade, and 20th Century Fox ran out of time to make a Daredevil movie, so he and Elektra went back home too. Despite losing Daredevil and Elektra, Fox was still going strong with X-Men, having started making prequels and Wolverine spin-offs. 2012 was an interesting year for Marvel's licensing deals, as it was the year that both The Amazing Spider-Man and The Avengers were released. The Oscorp Tower from the Spider-Man reboot was going to appear in the first Avengers movie, but the digital city in The Avengers had already been rendered by the time the Oscorp Tower model was complete. However, this signaled there was a good working relationship between Sony and Marvel Studios, with the potential of something more happening down the line.
A huge steaming ball of foreshadowing.
In 2013, Marvel Studios had just come off the back of 2 movies in 2 years, making over $1 billion each, and their smiles remained on their face when another 2 characters returned to them, those being Luke Cage and Ghost Rider, when Columbia decided not to make further projects after the financial and critical disappointment of Spirit of Vengeance. 2014 saw Marvel regain full control over the complicated rights of Namor. That same year, Sony released The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and 20th Century released X-Men Days of Future Past, featuring Quicksilver, like Avengers Age of Ultron in 2015. Because he and Scarlet Witch are significant characters to both the Avengers and X-Men in the comics, there were 2 of very few characters shared among studios. Another is Kingpin, shared with Sony and Marvel Studios due to his significant link to Spider-Man and Daredevil. Characters that weren't shared with Marvel were the Fantastic Four, and in 2015, 20th Century Fox produced a movie just before the rights were about to revert back to Marvel Studios.
Gotta say, it's fantastic.
I just mentioned that Sony and Marvel were communicating in 2012. Now in 2015, the studios had come to a deal that would see Spider-Man join the MCU. The deal would see Sony retain ownership of the Spider-Man film rights, financing, distribution, and receiving almost all the box office of the solo movies, but Marvel Studios could use Spider-Man in the MCU, with creative control over the character in their films.
That is awesome, dude!
In 2016, James Gunn had written Ego the Living Planet into Guardians of the Galaxy Volleyball 2, but Disney didn't own that character. Instead, he was with 20th Century Fox because of his connection with Galactus, who's connected to the Fantastic Four. So the 2 studios made a deal where Marvel would get Ego if Fox could change the powers of Negasonic Teenage Warhead in the Deadpool movie. I'm assuming they just wanted to use the character because of the name.
Negasonic Teenage. What the?
The first time we saw the Spider-Man deal was in 2016's Captain America Civil War, and the following year in Spider-Man Homecoming. We'll come back to Sony in a minute, because 2017 had a huge update for Marvel gaining the rights back to more of their characters. But before I get to that huge update, 20th Century Fox released 2 live-action X-Men spin-off shows in 2017, Legion and The Gifted. Now to that big announcement. On December 14, 2017, Disney had initiated a deal to buy 20th Century Fox with all their intellectual property, and by March 20, 2019, that agreement was finalized for $71.3 billion, bringing the X-Men, Deadpool, and Fantastic Four to Disney and Marvel Studios. So things were looking great for Marvel, until they weren't, because the Sony-Marvel deal had expired in 2019 after Spider-Man Far From Home. Negotiations to continue their relationship started, but Disney wanted a larger share of the box office revenue from Spider-Man movies, which was rejected by Sony. Months went by, fans went crazy scared, then went crazy happy when a new deal was struck. Disney would receive 25% of profits from solo Spider-Man films, Sony would retain distribution and final ownership of the Spider-Man film rights, and Spider-Man would continue to appear in both the MCU films and Sony's independent projects.
I'm not sure how I got here. Has to do with Spider-Man, I think.
2020 marked the final 20th Century produced X-Men movie, that being The New Mutants. 2021 and 2022 saw Sony play around with the different Marvel universes. The longest deal on this list, The Hulk, was back in full creative control at Marvel Studios in 2023, meaning they can now make a standalone Hulk film without worrying about technical contracts.
I guess we can just skip all that then.
In 2024, Sony finally gave us a Madam Web, Kraven the Hunter, and 3rd Venom movie we'd all been demanding. While over at Marvel Studios, Deadpool and Wolverine became the first Deadpool movie released under the Marvel Studios banner.
Oh, that logo music just gets you pumped.
Recently, Spider-Man's deal has been revised, requiring Sony to inform Marvel Studios about which Spider-Man villains they plan to use in its non-MCU projects. Marvel would then be allowed to use those characters in their movies after 30 days of the film appearing on streaming, and the Sony movies must have a budget of at least $75 million and be released in at least 2,000 US cinemas. I think it's basically implying that when most people see the Marvel logo, they think they're all made by the same people. So I assume Marvel Studios don't want their brand tarnished with projects that aren't necessarily reviewed very well. But as of to date, Marvel Studios has the rights back to all their characters except for Spider-Man. But as I've said, a collaborative relationship between Sony and Marvel remains. In order for Sony to keep the character, they need to continue producing Spider-Man movies every 5 years and 9 months, or their library will automatically revert back to Marvel Studios. On one hand, I would love it if Marvel Studios had the rights back to all their characters. It would make the whole shared universe thing way easier. But if they had done that from the beginning, we wouldn't have gotten half the movies in the MCU, like Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Ant-Man, or at least not for a long way down the line. And we wouldn't have gotten this many Spider-Man or X-Men films either. Because these characters were licensed out to different studios, it's allowed more movies to be made, to the point where we haven't had a year without a film featuring a Marvel character since 2001. And while there may have been a few missteps along the way in terms of quality, I think most of them are great, with multiple amazing movies from each Sony, Fox, and Marvel Studios.
Assemble.
Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what your favourite Marvel movie is, and don't forget to absolutely obliterate that like, subscribe, and share button. I'm just kidding. Only do it with enough force that it registers. I don't want any of you breaking whatever device you're watching this on.